Call the meeting to order at 5:05, back to open session. In closed session, we dealt with a complaint from CSEA regarding one of our board members and our response to that complaint. And if I could have Mr. Colby do some flags with one there, one there.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's see. So item number 8 is we have to wait for those folks. They're going to do our closing ceremony, is that right?
They do their opening and closing. I'm not sure where they're at. I saw one earlier, but I guess.
We can move that down.
Okay. So item number 9, 8. Mark?
Where do we do the agenda? Or are we going to approve the agenda?
We already did.
But we have.
That's when we get to the consent agenda. to
Okay.
pull something.
Okay, we'll just pull it down. Okay. All right. Some cast.
He doesn't follow directions.
I have to have one.
I'll get you one. I'll give you guys want these?
Yeah. Special one. Yeah. Thank you.
Make sure I have enough. I got 2 left.
I'll share mine with you.
No, I'll keep one and then I'll give it to Katrina.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Sorry, Dan, you're out. Okay. So what I put together is the CAPS data. Let me first say that my frustration with state testing is immeasurable because we're now in the middle of October before we get our real results.
From last year.
Last year. So doing things about them is a little problematic. Because obviously one of the big things is third graders being at grade level at reading. Well, we get the data October of their 4th grade year. It's a bit late. However,
Is there, I mean, obviously, you can't be the only superintendent with frustration about this.
right,
Is there any pressure on the state to step this up?
no. Because they're gonna do what they're gonna do. And again, this is a Common Core test. I've said multiple times, if I were the state superintendent, my first day would be, we would have a basic skills test. In other words, can the kids read? Can they do grade level math? Can they do grade level grammar? If they can, so a teacher, we could grade that easily and quickly.
But isn't this the CASP done on a computer now?
It is,
So all the data is entered by the kids on the computer.
that day. Yep.
One would think that it would be almost instantaneous in terms of the results.
Well, that's what the promise was, but if it didn't work out.
Yeah, I still go by, Spencer goes and takes the ACT or SAT, in 3 weeks he has his results sent to his house, sent to the school, all done. An SAT that determines your college placement can be done in that time frame. Our state can't give 3rd graders a test that takes a year practically to get data back on. It's ridiculous. But it does tell a story. It tells a story. Remember, Common Core is not just basic skills. Common Core is, can you do application, think deeper, and all of those skills that are not just basic skills, they're application of the basic skills. So, high school. If you look at the high school, you're looking at the big number in the center. That's the number, percentage of students who met or exceeded the standard for ELA. And if you look at math, it's significantly lower. I'm just going to tell you, there's a very simple correlation here. That math number will represent A to G, not ELA. A to G is represented by math. Because you have to have Algebra 2 skills. And so that number is very representative. If you look down below, I put down there last year, the high school was at 42 and 21. Well, I would hope about a year or 2 years from now, that data is going to change because these are still students who were in the CPM world. We've made some significant changes at Bechtel and at the high school that I'm hoping that number is going to get a lot better. I would say that we have the best math staff we've had in a long time at the high school right now. So I'm pretty confident that's going to get better. I know Bechtel is already in that position, doing better and doing things that are more conducive to scoring. So if you look at Bechtel, it's the building, by the way, it's 6, 7, 8. The high school number is only juniors. Juniors are the only ones who take it. Bechtel's number is reflective of 6, 7, and 8.
So that number, the 42.05 and 15.47 percentage, they reflect only the juniors,
Right, the juniors are the only
seniors.
ones who take it, the test.
and they're seniors now.
They're seniors now. Spencer's in that number somewhere, on the plus side.
Is there a reason why we don't test freshmen, sophomore?
It's the state's program. State's program is spring of junior year.
Spring of the junior year?
Yep.
And we get this in October of the following year?
Yep. Which you took it in March, I think. Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. Spencer took this in March last year, and we have the data now. So,
So there isn't a window of time that they take that test?
it is,
Like-
it's a March window. It basically goes through the month of March and a week in April as well.
And all school districts are testing in
I
that
think
same
it's all of
window?
April, isn't it?
Yeah, I always thought it was all.
Yeah, maybe it's a week of March and all of April,
To
something.
the end of the year.
Yeah, and there's a window, but the data came out, the state releases all the data at the same time. The only reason they stagger the test, I can only assume, is that they couldn't handle all the data at one time. I mean, I don't know why they stagger the tests, other than maybe schools want to wait longer.
I could see that if it was coming out in paper,
Yeah,
but it's no longer coming in on paper.
right,
And the tests are now done online,
right,
so.
yeah, yeah.
But there's one portion where the kids have to actually type in sentences, and that's what takes a long time to be graded.
Yeah. But I liken it to the SAT and ACT. There's a written part of the SAT and the ACT, and they get it to you in about 3 weeks. So I'm not sure why we can do that. And those are national test days. They have thousands of students taking the ACT on the same day all over the nation. And it's graded in Iowa on the ACT and back in about 3.5 weeks.
It's because it's the state of California.
Yeah, we're doing things different.
So if you look at Bechtel, I have Bechtel's current, and remember that 6, 7, 8, their scores from previous year. Flip to Blosser. Those are Blosser's scores from this year. And you can compare them to last year, down at the bottom. They're up slightly in both. I put Sherwood on here because Sherwood is one of the schools who register building scores. You'll probably ask me, why is Sanhedrin not on here? Because Sanhedrin does not have enough students that are junior year testing to warrant a building report. They're only individuals.
You might only get 3 or 5 students at any given time.
Right. And although Sherwood has low numbers, there are 3 grades in each one.
So Blosser is third, fourth, fifth, right? They all take it?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, Blosser's, what you're looking at Blosser's third, fourth, fourth, and fifth. And you're also looking at that at Sherwood, third, fourth, and fifth.
Is there anything stopping us from administering the test to freshmen and sophomores as well?
Yeah, the state gives us X number of tests. They would have to produce more tests and give us more access.
It's just because it's kind of a, when you're really talking about that one small group, it makes it difficult to make sense of the numbers.
Well, and I don't want to beat this horse to death, but if we're
Right.
talking SAT, there's a PSAT that students take, a practice SAT, prior to the real SAT, because they're actually a real testing organization. You know, the state of California really isn't a real testing organization. This comes from the Smarter Balance group, who puts together a test and gives you data back in a less than timely fashion.
So since Sherwood has a middle school now, these scores don't reflect the middle school?
Right, because their numbers don't generate enough scores to generate a building report. We may be close this year. We're at 16 or 17 in our middle school, at Sherwood, so we may have enough to generate a report. Prior to this, we did not. But
Because it's only one class.
I want you to pay very close attention to something that I've talked about before. It is unusual, and I mean highly unusual in the district. Look at the ELA score at Blosser, then look at it at Bechtel, and then look at it at the high school. Most schools go the opposite direction. The test gets harder, the students are less motivated, all those things fall into play. I mean, Bob, you've been around testing forever. I mean, generally that's the scenario. The higher you go, the scores tend to go like this because of motivation and difficulty of the test and all that. We actually do way better as we go up. And I can tell you why. Bechtel is set up to do a boatload of remediation, and so is the high school. And when you look at the high school score, for example, in 11th grade, there's one teacher at the high school who does 11th grade English. There's one. She does them all. And so she has that accountability, and she has that as her mission to make sure that happens. It makes a huge difference. Obviously at Bechtel, there's 4 people who do English and there's 4 people who do math. And so that for 6, 7, 8. So it's very focused to 4 people in Bechtel. It changes when you get to Blosser because now you have basically 16 to 17 people.
So this is last year, right?
Yep.
Okay, so what I'm curious about is last year, what I'm curious about is the number of new teachers per school site over there from the ones who have been there a while. Like at the high school, there were hardly any new teachers last year, or were there 4 or 5 out of the 30 or however many are here? Do you happen to know those numbers?
Well,
like at Bechtel, there were, out of say 25 or I don't know however many teachers, but were there like 6 that were new?
Well, the high school ELA can tell you really simply. If you're talking 11th grade English, because that's the year where you focus, it's the same person.
Right.
And she had as good a results the previous year too.
Okay, and so there wasn't, I mean, just, I think I know who you're talking about, and this is a tenured long-term teacher. Okay, so, I mean, it's been with the district a long while. So then in math, were there very many new compared to long-term math teachers?
There was 1 new math teacher at the high school last year, and there's 1 new one this year.
Making 2, or it's still 1?
Just 1.
1, oh, okay, out of like 4 math teachers?
3.
Or 3? At Bechtel, do you kind of know those guys too?
Our 2 7th and 8th grade math teachers are still the same and have been for, I'm trying to think, is this her 4th year?
No, 7th and 8th grade math teacher?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is her 4th year, and the other teacher has more years than that. So Bechtel's math has been consistent in
Consistent
7th and 8th
overall.
grade. 6th grade, there's been some changes.
So what are there usually in a 2 math teachers per grade level?
Well, actually, so last year in language arts, we had 3 of the 5 language arts teachers that were new,
Uh-huh.
that were actually new teachers,
Uh-huh.
not just new to Bechtel. In mathematics, we have only 1 teacher who's a veteran teacher in this district, and we had 1,
Where your 7th and 8th were the same.
2, no, my 8th grade was a second-year teacher last year.
Well, okay.
Yeah, so, I mean, fairly, not
Yeah.
completely new, but fairly new. And my 6th grade last year was new teachers.
And if you look at the data, if you looked at 6th, 7th, and 8th,
Uh-huh.
what you would see is that math was the fairly consistent number in 6th, 7th, and 8th. That number didn't change dramatically. In 6, 7, 8 English, the number continues to rise from 6 to 7, 7 to 8.
Uh-huh.
And that has to do with how Bechtel is set up to work on these. And so,
No, that's good. I don't mean to put it on the spot. I just wanted to know, like at Blosser, and I didn't think there were too many new teachers at Blosser, but maybe there were, because all of them are teaching math and English.
and the Sherwood number is based off 3 classes. It's based off 3rd, 4th, and 5th.
Uh-huh.
And they have enough numbers to generate a building report. And it shows the value, to be honest with you, about multi-age. That's what it's showing you.
That's true in kind of small school settings.
Right.
And Blosser, out of 14 or 16 teachers or however many they had, 3 or 4 were new and that's it?
Yeah, there weren't many.
Okay.
Some were new to building, but not new to district,
Oh, okay.
because that's another factor you
But
have.
probably new to that grade level is what I'm
Yeah,
thinking. if
new
they
to the
do
grade
building.
level, yes. New to district, not as much.
Oh, okay.
And that is kind of the CAS scores in a nutshell. These go on our dashboard. And we have, let's say we have room for improvement. And, I would love to see the numbers turn around where the lower is higher than the top. And we got to figure out how to make that happen.
Well, the math the math scores follow the trend up.
Yeah.
With regards to.
If you look at the math score, you'll see that it will replicate A to G. So whatever that percentage of math proficiency is, generally is the exact same percentage of A to G students. And both Bob and Robert have experienced this before, that's kind of, math is a gatekeeper.
You're talking about inexperienced teachers and so forth.
A little bit, yeah.
Did I get that? I passed this on. You guys forward that on?
I haven't forwarded it yet, I was going to talk about it here, but go ahead.
Yeah, this is interesting, article out of Education Week. It's a spotlight on responding to teacher shortages nationwide. It's talking about the idea that there's estimated 112,000, the nation is short by about 112,000 teachers today. In 2018-19, talks about the average in terms of their experience levels. For example, novice teachers back in 2012, 6.8% as of, these are teachers with 2 years of experience or less, whereas currently at 9.4%. Talks about inexperienced teachers, in other words, 5 years or less, 20% versus 22.4% today. no educational background in the subject of their main assignment. For example, that's almost the same today as it was back then, 31%. Talks about not fully credentialed or certified, 8.4% in 2012 versus 8.8%. It's pretty interesting about that. It also talks about the number of teachers that are coming from places like the Philippines to fill the void that's here, how very, very qualified people are leaving places like that to teach in the U.S., mainland U.S., because they get paid so little there, and yet they can come here with tremendous experience from there and a lot of credentials and do quite well here, despite the fact that our wages are so low, but they're so much higher in comparison to what they make there. So turns out that's where we're finding some of the teacher shortages that we need.
Plus they're here instead of there.
Right, but they're sending 50% of their paycheck, to the Philippines. But for the places where we apparently have our largest weakness in the States in terms of math and science teachers and special ed, places that are hard to fill, we're getting teachers from out of the country that are filling those roles. And it's basically, and again, then it goes in and talks a lot about why those things are occurring, and no small amount of it has to do with, if you talk about teachers that are going into the sciences, for example, they actually go to school to become a teacher, but by the time they actually land a job, they find out that they're going to starve to death trying to become a math or science teacher in public education, and they get snapped up by industry where they can get into research jobs and similar kinds of avenues at much, much higher starting pay. And they have a career earning potential that's far, far greater than they would be as a teacher.
Now, I want to do an impromptu on this, and I do not know the answer to this question yet. But Spencer, are you looking at being a teacher when you graduate?
Probably not.
Why not?
It's never crossed my mind.
Okay, stop. Any of you planning to be a teacher when you graduate?
They don't make enough money.
And I will tell you that, and I'm not trying to butter him up, but Spencer represents the best and brightest in our high school. He's a smart young man. He was fabulous in speech and debate in Academia. He's athletic, he could coach. He's exactly what we need in education. But coming out of high school, it's like, yeah, I've never thought about that. And he's being nice, because I know him, but he's saying, yeah, I'm not going to put up with that nonsense. And so that's one of the issues. I happened to go to our football game at St. Helena, and I spent time with one of their board president and their superintendent. Well, they had a math opening this year. They had 64 applicants. Their base pay is $71,000, and they pay full health care. Now, why is it that way? Because they get $36,000 per student, and we get 10. That's why. That's why they have a turf softball field. Not just football, there's softball fields, even turf.
It's also why their facilities look great. It's also a reason why they charter buses to take their teams
And
places.
so, in my opinion, and again, this is Mark's opinion, which usually means it's skewed to one side, but this is an opportunity. The state ought to look at situations like that and say, the revenue generated there should be spread throughout the county, not just to Calistoga and St. Helena. Because those two schools are off the chart in what they get per student.
That's because they're funded vastly different than what we are.
If you go over to the Sierras, the exact same thing happens. Because remember, basic aid is the amount of local revenue that's generated stays local. And it's divided amongst the number of students you have. So it's not uncommon in the Sierras and some of these small districts that they're way into basic aid. That is an anomaly that is disproportional to everybody else. And I know it would be unpopular for the folks who live over there to say, we're playing Robin Hood, okay, you raise it, but we're gonna spread it out. But when you go to look for a teacher, and your starting pay is 71, you're gonna get some applicants. And there's no cost for healthcare. And I asked him, I said, do you publish that when you put it out? He goes, oh yeah, of course we do. They're stealing veteran teachers from other places, because they'll go up to 12 years of experience on top of it. So,
It's not a level playing field. by any stretch
not
of the
even
imagination.
remotely close.
I noticed Ukiah Unified has taken to putting a
The bulletin board, yeah.
bulletin board on the north end of Ukiah saying, come teach for us.
Yeah. Yeah, I told my neighbor that I was gonna doctor that sign up a little bit. Deb's my neighbor.
That's all right.
Well, on the 25th of this month, we will have the attention of our assembly person, Mr. James Woods, and hopefully we'll be able to bend his ear a little bit with respect to some of these issues. But
I didn't want to get off on that tangent, but I think it was a good opportunity to,
anyway,
there is disparity.
this is a really, really good article in here. I've asked that Mark forward it on to the rest of the board and the WTA leadership, so that hopefully everybody can get an opportunity to take a look at this. And I won't necessarily change anything, but at least bring some perspective to what we are.
Okay, well, so that's part of the reason that I asked about new and long-term, is because I've always been a pretty firm believer that no matter how great is the newest, they don't have the experience or anything, as does a long-term teacher. But I recently watched some show, I'm trusting it was true, and they were finding that that may not continue to be the case. And so I was just trying to line up Willits with what I had heard. And so that I'm real curious. I naturally sort of lean toward the longer you do something, the more experience, the better you're going to do it. But it didn't really look that way. I mean, on this one show, 1 out of 100 is not a big deal, but it's just...
It also goes deeper than that, and you can also look at it from a perspective of just look at housing. There's a traveling physical therapist, I only know about him because I'm spending a fair amount of time over there lately, who basically came to Willits as a traveling physical therapist, I think traveling nurses, traveling docs, that sort of thing. He was within a week of turning down the assignment when he finally found housing here. He was up against that last. He said if another week had gone by, he ended up going someplace else. So it was that difficult to find housing here in Willits because there just is so little. And then you couple that with location, location, location. We've heard that thing before. If you can't find housing and being starting wage here at $42,000, and you still can't find housing, why would you come here?
He was from the Bay Area, isn't he? I mean, housing was already supposed to be an issue.
He's from the Sierras.
Sierras?
But
Oh, I thought
he's a traveling physical therapist. He and his wife, and she works from home, and he works down here at the physical therapist office. But
And our problem is our base is now 46 for teachers, and we pay 80-some% of healthcare, which is good.
and it's an anomaly. We're a rare one with that.
And it's good for our area, for Mendocino. The problem is, it's not good compared to basic aid districts or urban areas. And our volume of teachers just by location is going to be less. And you add the factors in of, well, if I'm going to go rural, who's going to pay me what? And so
You're almost stuck homegrown to a certain degree. Pardon?
So I'm a homegrown. All my years, I'm a fourth-year teacher. I'm in column 3, and I've been booted out of my home of 18 years. I have to move out on November 3rd, and I have to move in with my dad because I can't afford rent in this town at $1,000 for a 1-bedroom.
Yeah.
Because I have student loans, and I'm paying $250 a month for health insurance, and I've incurred a lot of debt because I tried to go through school on my own, and I'm not the only teacher there's lots of others that are renting rooms from people, and that to me is really sad that we are professionals and we can't even afford to live in this town.
Well, I have very strong personal ideas about how that can get fixed at the state level.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I've taken a
And
position
I'll
with
pass
the
those on to your
CTA.
leadership next week when we meet.
Yep, I've taken a state council position with CTA, so I can have a voice and start fighting more for better funding for us, and because it's just not okay. I'm gonna be 45, I'm gonna live with my dad. I mean, it's humiliating.
And even the teachers who make 71 in St. Helena can't
They
live
can't afford to
they
live
don't
there
live in
either,
St.
I know,
Helena.
I mean.
They all live in Santa Rosa or Napa or somewhere.
Yeah.
Because they can't live there for that.
It's heartbreaking.
There are challenges no matter where you go, but still, the inequities are amazing, and drawing quality people into the profession is part of the issue.
Well, the 5 old teachers at the table here, including me, we got into it in a passion way. That was passionate. We wanted to do that. We were passionate about it. That's not the norm anymore. The norm is it's looked more as employment.
Well, that's the reason why
No,
we're
that's
in a
not
shortage
why,
of
that's not why I went back to
112,000.
school. in
No,
my
no, no,
40s.
not just you. I'm just talking in general.
Yeah.
So when I talk to young teachers, you know, they're big about pay and benefits and all that stuff. In the old days, it was about, oh, the kids and what do you do, and I like that. There was a passionate part. We didn't talk about as much about the employment as we did the environment and situation. Now that conversation is more about the employment than it is the situation.
We close this topic and move on?
So FFA is here.
Yes,
FFA,
You're,
Claire, you got your troop?
Oh, yeah.
Let's go.
That's why we should have school uniforms.
I'm in.
So nice.
so at this point, we'll turn the meeting over to our FFA for opening and closing.
The meeting room will come to order. We are now holding a meeting of the Willits FFA chapter. Mr. Vice President, are all officers at their stations?
I shall call the roll of officers, determine if they're at their stations, and report back to you, Mr. President. The Sentinel.
Stationed by the door.
Your duties there?
Through this door pass many friends of the FFA. It is my duty to see that the door is open to our friends at all times and that they are welcome. I care for the meeting room, prepare for million. I strive to keep the room comfortable and assist the President in maintaining order.
The reporter.
The reporter is stationed by the flag.
Why by the flag?
As the flag covers the United States of America, I strive to inform that in order that every man, woman, and child may know that the FFA is a national organization that reaches from the state of Alaska to the Virgin Islands and from the state of Maine to Hawaii.
The treasurer.
Stationed at the Emblem of Washington,
Your duties there?
I keep a record of receipts and disbursements just as Washington kept his farm accounts, carefully and accurately. I encourage thrift among the members and strive to build up our financial standing through savings and investments. George Washington was better able to serve his country because he was financially independent.
The secretary.
Stationed by the Earth Corner.
Your duties there?
I keep an accurate record of all meetings and correspond with other secretaries wherever corn is grown and FFA members meet. Mr. Vice President, why do you keep a plow at your station?
The plow is a symbol of labor and tillage of the soil. Without labor, neither knowledge nor wisdom can accomplish much. My duties require me to assist at all times in directing the work of our organization. I preside over meetings in the absence of our president, whose place is beneath the rising sun.
Why is the president so stationed?
The rising sun is a token of a new era in agriculture. If we will follow the leadership of our president, we shall be led out of the darkness of selfishness and into the glorious sunlight of brotherhood and cooperation. Mr. President, all officers are at their stations.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The Secretary will call the roll of members.
There are 6 members and numerous guests present, Mr. President.
Thank you. FFA members, why are we here? to practice brotherhood, honor agricultural opportunities and responsibilities, and develop those qualities of leadership which an FFA member should possess. May we accomplish our purposes. I now declare this meeting of the Willits FFA chapter duly open for the transaction of business or attention to any matters which may properly be presented. As this is a special meeting held for the purpose of the opening and closing ceremonies contest, we will dispense with the business meeting and proceed at once into the closing ceremonies. Madam Secretary, do you have a record of any further business which should now be transacted?
I have none, Mr. President.
Does any member know of any new or unfinished business which should properly come before this meeting? We are about to adjourn this meeting of the Willits FFA chapter. As we mingle with others, let us be diligent in labor, just in our dealings, courteous to everyone, and above all, honest and fair in the game of life. Fellow members and guests, join me in a salute to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I now declare this meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
So we're gonna introduce ourselves briefly, starting at Claire.
Well, thank you guys for letting us practice in preparation for our contest. I'm Claire, as most of you know, a junior.
I'm Danielle, as most of you know me, I'm a sophomore.
I'm Ryan Reed, and I'm a senior.
I'm Cody Brandon, and I'm a senior.
I'm Taylor Drew, and I'm a junior.
I'm Zachary Henson, I'm a sophomore.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
Good job.
Cody, I didn't even know that was you, man, dressed up. I'm like, who is that?
Mark, did you get a good picture for?
Yes, I did.
You did?
Yeah.
I remember my part.
Not used to Cody dressed up.
Okay, so we are at WTA.
The WTA Executive Board has set up a monthly meeting now that we're going to have with Mr. Westerberg every month starting in November. So that'll start building some communications between the two entities. We have parent-teacher conferences happening, and we have a good turnout at all three sites so far from what's been reported back to me. I don't know if you saw or heard about the Sherwood School Theater performance. They had the San Francisco Opera come, and they did the performance here at the High School of Pirates of Penzance, and we had all of third grade come over and see it. And it was really exciting for them. Even the ones that said it was weird because they sang all the words. But it was a good experience for them because they probably wouldn't get exposure to opera otherwise. WTA is supporting the Homecoming and Spirit Day by covering all of the Snack Shack shifts for Homecoming on Friday. WTA agrees to the superintendent's offer to make the last day of school a half day. We did a survey and that's a thumbs up. We had talked about that at the last meeting as being a concern. So we got that taken care of. Brookside and Blosser are working with their administration to re-implement the benchmark curriculum. Thank you so much, Mr. Westerberg. I have heard nothing but the greatest of gratefulness from the teachers about being allowed to use benchmark again. So they were very happy about that. Regarding the CASP results, I just wanted to clarify that it's a 7-month turnaround that we're talking about, not a 19-month. Because when you're saying year, you mean school year.
School year.
But I was confused at first, like, holy cow, it's not that long, is it?
It's long enough that we can't do anything.
7
Be
months.
nice. If we had it in June, we could
Yeah.
do something and be proactive come the fall. And
And I
Wow.
have been to CASP training conferences, and I know what's holding it up. But at this point in the ballgame, they should be getting the first part of it to us. And then the typed sentence entries, you know, when that gets graded by hand later, we'll accept that later. But there's stuff we could get right away.
So you said you know what the holdup is?
It's the grading by hand,
Oh, okay.
the explanations.
So they don't want to turn it loose until they turn it all loose at once?
No, well, yeah. And then they have to find qualified people to do the job during the summer. They don't pay a lot for that, you know, so.
They just don't have enough people doing that.
Right.
And the other hidden double secret thing they don't talk about is they establish a cut scores. What means 1, 2, 3, or 4. And that, honestly, I believe they get all the data first and then determine their cut scores. Which is the opposite of what it really should be. It should be a standard curve of what, these are the expectations, but it is not.
When I did sample grading, they didn't show, are you saying they get the other data first and they use that to kind of influence their thinking?
It's developing a cut score. What's the difference between a 3 and a 4? What score creates that?
Oh,
And I think
yeah.
part of the slowdown too is they use the data from other states because it's a common test.
That makes sense.
And so they're establishing these cut scores, which aren't necessary. You know, if I get a,
It's a moving target.
right, if I get a 75, that's a C plus, or a C. That's what a 75 is. But in the CAF score, it may move based on what they determine 1, 2, 3, 4.
Bell curve.
And it's kind of subjective because it's done by human beings, so. Let's see, I wanted to respond to your desire to have Blosser's scores be higher than the high school, right? Is that what I
Well,
understood you to say?
I mean, long-term, yeah, that's the norm in districts where scores actually decline as they go up, not go down.
That's interesting. Because in that very short time I've had to reflect, I thought, well, what is holding us up at the elementary school level? And I'm thinking, you know, as a third grade teacher, I have to teach the children how to type, how to use a computer. I mean, we're a couple months into the school year and I'm still daily explaining the difference between an address bar and a search bar. So getting them familiar with computers is a big hang up. And when you compound it with the fact that we don't have computers in every classroom all day, they're not getting the exposure that they could get. I know we're working on it, but that will make a big difference when we're not having to shuffle one cart to 3 classrooms all day.
But if that were the case, the scores would be dramatically higher as they go up, 3rd to 4th to 5th.
Because they're getting more experience
And
with
that's
computers.
not the data. The data is relatively stagnant, 3rd to 4th to 5th.
Are you also including the years in which they started getting computers?
Yeah.
Because that's a building process.
Well, they've
so-
been there 3 years and on computers for 3 years, so when they're 5th grade. But technology's a part of it, but it's a small piece. It is a piece, but it's not a large piece.
And I would argue that most school districts are in that same boat.
Right.
No, I would say most third
Think
graders.
about the CASP though, they're taking that on a computer
I
unless
understand
they're
that,
savvy.
But we're not unique that way.
Right.
Every third grade child across the state is taking it on a computer. And I would argue that every third grade child has to be taught how to use it.
And it's part of the rationale behind IXL. IXL is an
Right. It's another
experience that
opportunity.
replicates that testing scenario.
So what do you think it is then that we're seeing this unique trend?
It's not able to read basic skill. It's basic
Okay.
skill reading.
Okay.
In math, it's basic skill. It's multiplication, fractions, division. You know, you taught middle school math. You know the basic skill issue. And unfortunately, without basic skills, you're not going to be able to do application. And you're not gonna do deeper thinking, because you're spending your time trying to read it or trying to do the simple math that we hope that they have by that age.
So then, our hope is that unlocking the code at Brookside is gonna bring them with those reading skills in 3rd grade.
That's the hope.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Just trying to understand what your thinking is about the trend. Okay. And then I wanted to respond just very quickly. I haven't read the article, but I just wanted, do you really mean, are you really suggesting that we should fill public service government jobs with foreigners and immigrants?
No, not at all.
Because we can't find people here?
I'm just saying that that's occurring.
That's a trend.
It's a trend that's occurring right now. There's in larger numbers than we've ever done nationwide, and that's another report.
We seldom have a multi-subject posting where we don't have somebody who's not in the United States apply. We generally have at least one.
Are we seeing this with firefighters and police officers too,
No.
or is this
No.
just unique to?
No, we're paying firefighters and police officers just fine.
Bingo, that's the difference.
There is the difference, and it's flat and simple, it's wrong. We have our priorities mixed up. And I'm talking about our priorities right from the top level down,
Okay,
okay?
gotcha.
I'm not complaining about being paid well, I'm complaining about the fact that you're not.
Thank you. We share that concern with you.
Just
Okay.
understand that my sentiments are based on basically simple fact, but the other simple fact is the fix isn't at our level. The fix is simply not at our level. It's at the state level. And if the teachers' associations don't figure it out, that they can fix this almost overnight, in my opinion. And I'll pass it on next week.
Okay. What year are you running? All right. That's all from WTA. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dan, spotlight.
Welcome, everyone. I just like to thank the classified staff because being wintertime, I spend most of my morning going site to site, getting, make sure heat units are on and things like that. It's dark and you actually see all the lights start to come on, steam starts to roll out, and you look at it's all the classified staff there getting everything ready. And so that's a big thanks to everybody for doing that. And I'd like to thank the FFA crew here. They have great points. They make a great point about honesty and integrity, and it's part of their motto. And I hope they can keep that throughout their life, because if more people had that, I think everything would be a lot better around a lot of places. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Board comments. Let's start with Spencer.
Water fountains, where are we at?
We have signed an agreement to have the company put out the bid to get it done.
Okay.
And I can't do anything, it's federal money.
Right.
If they'd send me the money, I'd get it done in a month.
Right.
But it's a federal dollars and I have to wait for them to get through their process.
Do you have any sort of ETA on that?
I am hoping we will have construction happening in November.
Okay.
Is there a short-term fix for that?
Not really.
Work around at all?
Well, we talked about opening the cafeteria.
Yeah. I mean, other than buying units ourselves and putting them in, that's what we had to do at Blosser. And Blosser was a necessity because the water wasn't drinkable out of the
Right. So we talk about, and actually we talked about it very long ago in relationship to another issue, but opening up the cafeteria and leaving it open during the day?
Has it been open?
Not that I've seen.
Dan has a couple.
It might have been.
I just, on that, I think that some of that issue is because when folks walk up, that doorknob's pretty ancient and old and it's got creaks in it. And it might understand it's not open. And so I put those little lock blocks on there today to make sure that when the door's open, they slide it and the door can't close. So you just walk up and pull. And that's the way it's supposed to be.
One of the
So
things
hopefully
I'll-
that helps out with it.
One of the things I'll do is I'll get with Dan, because Dan knows, we've retrofit where we're having water fountains right now. And at the bare minimum, we should be able to retrofit at least one, so there's one accessible. And so we'll have to look for the site that would be most conducive to retrofit. And it needs to kind of be protected, and so it doesn't freeze, and we have to be able to cut into the wall and that kind of stuff. So I'll look at that with Dan, because we do gotta get going. I mean, it's super frustrating. I'm in the middle of 5 grants right now.
We used to suck a sprinkler at school. That's, you were thirsty, that's what you had for a sprinkler. Times are different.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Spencer, I do want you to comment on something, so would you talk about the clubs that are going on at the high school now? One of the things we did contractually was we put in a stipend to encourage staff to put clubs in place. And it's been very effective at the high school.
We've got a lot of new clubs springing up this year, which I personally, I think it's pretty cool. Whether people are gonna get, involved at them at the level that they need them, we'll see. But just, the fact that someone's doing something, at least someone's interested. We've got a robotics club, book clubs, all sorts of stuff.
There's a knitting club, I put a post out there.
Club, there's a milk club.
A Latino club.
Christian club, an atheist club,
Yes.
shared a table at one of the games.
Yeah, and it's really had a good impact on the high school. My feeling is that if we can engage a student in something besides the classroom, they're gonna be far more successful and vested into the program. And the high school has such a variety of people with interest and abilities that the clubs are really, really taking off here. And I know at the other levels you're doing them too. Maria, what clubs do you?
We are going to have a drama club, or, theater. We are not going to have a skateboard club. We were going to do that, but the teacher decided that he'd rather keep it informal, but he's still engaging kids.
Yep.
And we have the Communicators for Kindness is one of our clubs, and I think chess club.
It is, and at the elementary it's happening, out at Sherwood we have an Odyssey of the Mind group, and it's just, that is an example of a place where it's a win-win for everybody. Other than Nikki who has to pay the bill, it's a win-win for everybody. And we use a very simple mantra, is that meet with your principal. If they agree, you meet 10 times with 10 kids, and you get the stipend. So it's a 10-10, principal agrees that you should do it, it's a stipend. We're not making it complicated, we're making it super easy, and I really feel good about that, because that's one of the things that separate us from other districts. If you look at why does a kid choose to go to a certain place? Well, to find things that they really like and are engaged with. I was here for lunch and a girl brought up this stocking hat she made in the knitting club, or the yarn club. It was really well done, it was kind of cool.
So what about materials? Because usually when you have a club around some common interest, it requires materials, so.
Well, they're tapping Mike pretty hard for his discretionary fund, let's just say that. They're doing a good job of finding volunteers.
Most clubs are in charge of their own fundraising also.
Right.
So you want to get something done, you go out and you fundraise for it, then you get it.
I can speak to that too, Jeannie, that over at Blosser, we're gonna have a production of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and we're gonna go to Willits Educational Foundation to ask for money for the backdrops and the costumes. So that, the stipend is taken care of that way, but we can also sometimes access WEF generosity.
And if you were at our last home football game, what you saw was about 6 tables of clubs by the concession stand there with all different clubs doing things, here's what we do, and engaging not only students and parents to show them, but also soliciting donations. They don't pay to get in. That's another beauty of not paying to get in. It helps guilt trip you into donating to some of the groups. Cool.
And our clubs access the student body funding. Because it's fundraised money.
Anything further?
That's it.
Sports, things going good?
Yeah, sports are doing good. Our football team is doing a lot better than they have been in the past. I don't think it's any secret that we've been pretty bad the last 2 years, but we're bringing it up, so.
The 49ers are 4-0 in that game, so, you know.
Correlation.
Exactly, you know.
It's underdog.
Wonders never cease.
Yeah, that's about it. We're all doing good.
Thank you, Spencer. Paul?
Well, I went to Blosser to follow up on my visit and see the 5th grade because I missed them the last time I went. And I spoke with their ELL program people, the English language learning. And it was informative, and I really appreciated the meet and greet from last month. And I've been invited back again on a little less expensive type of event, and so probably I will do that this coming month or the next one. Then I went to Brookside and I saw some boxes of materials. I went and spoke at length with the ELL program. I really found that very, very informative, and I'm really happy that the ELL coordinator at Center Lengya is pleased with how things are running. I have to piggyback on what you said. That's a really good thing. That's a really good thing. And so I've been invited back there too, which is kind of fun because I like to see what everybody's up to. For Bechtel Grove, I have a couple of main things, well, 3 really. The biggest one is I was telling Maria, I really appreciate that she comes to board meetings, and I just think that's a really big deal. It's difficult a lot, and yet you do it. Thank you. I did go to the ELAC meeting. I am very, very interested in when the district does their DLAC meeting. I was a little disappointed that the other Blosser and Bechtel don't quite have, Blosser and Brookside haven't yet had the opportunity to set up their ELACs. But I do understand that in the past they've run into the same issue that Bechtel Grove runs into, which is, it's not particularly well attended. And so I've made it my latest plan to go see what I can do to puff that up a bit. I really did believe it was because the middle school was too old. Okay, the older the kid gets, the less their folks seem to come to back to school night and all the rest of the stuff. But I found that it's a similar issue, and all I can figure is that there's some sort of misunderstanding going on, because the difference between regular school and summer session is humongous. So I plan on looking into that, and I'll let you know later what I learned. The third thing I wanted to say about Bechtel Grove was that MCOE over last Saturday, and this is a thank you to Tessa for taking care of all of that. Anyway, and thank you also to Liesel for encouraging about 8 or so teachers to go. Well, I didn't tell you the whole sentence. MCOE offered a training on behavior management and the hierarchy and the interventions and the whole routine. I did notice 3 teachers from different schools, but there were like 7 or 8 teachers from Bechtel Grove. 7, oh, okay, I wasn't sure if that one I saw was there, but I think she used to be at Bechtel, okay? And so she was at another site now, another district. But anyway, the big deal was they spent all day there, and they were there from like 8:30 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon, 4:30. No, we got out early because we took a eating lunch or whatever that was. Anyway, it was real informative. It was really, really wonderful to see brand new teachers realize that little behavior management and a little more thorough understanding of the intervention systems that go on would be in their best interest. Especially one new teacher kept saying, can we do these later? This 8 o'clock is killing me, I'm exhausted, and all this other. But she went, she wasn't getting paid, and it just showed a really good thing, and it was a great thing by MCOE. I understand from a thing that I read in the, those weekly messages, that there's supposed to be a little type of that training happening at Blosser, but I have to look into that because I'm not real sure how that's working out. But it was a real good thing, and it was really good. I understand that, you took care of sending out information, and that you encouraged people to attend Maria, and that was a very big deal. And even Lisa, Liesl, who, she's been plenty of time with the district, but she's also a BITSA provider, and she kind of went, I talked with her for a while. It wasn't, here I am a role model, I'm attending this thing, but it was that, yes, she had encouraged people, and she went and watched it herself, and it just was a good and a big deal, and it was free. I don't know to who everyone, but I know the participants didn't have to pay, so that was a big deal. And then I have to also piggyback on what you said, Tess, about the benchmarks being appreciated and accepted in the whole routine. There was only a little sentence on there that I had a touch of a concern with, because it reminded me a whole lot of the no child left behind sentences, and that was that within 2 years, I think it said, or maybe it was one, that 75% of all classes would be on grade level or above. I think that's a nifty goal. I just don't.
I'm talking on basic skills, not on SBAC.
Oh, well, that's a step, because there I mixed part of that up there, because I was thinking,
All I'm talking about is
just reading and math, right?
Dibbles and math and the grammar, just the basic skills.
Oh, okay. Well,
That's what I'm talking
about. There might be a hope for that.
I'd love to have 75% SBAC, but that's unrealistic.
Well, that's sort of the
But
way
it's
I
not
saw it.
unrealistic in a class of 22 to have 16 of your kids green and dibbles. That's not an unrealistic expectation.
Yeah.
That's a C, 75%.
Well, I know it isn't a high grade, it is. But anyway, so that, that was something that came up. But that's all that I have to say, thanks. Or at this point.
I attended the Sherwood School performance of the Pirates of Penzance that they did in conjunction with the San Francisco Opera Guild, and it was wonderful, and Robert's daughter was fantastic. But the whole experience was great. The third grade being there, I guess some of the high school classes were up in the auditorium upstairs, and there was a choir made up of Sherwood students who weren't actually on stage, and it was obvious that the Sherwood School had done a lot of work on this, and that the San Francisco Opera Guild really knew what they were doing. They knew how to work with children, and you saw them sort of, put a hand on a student's shoulder to move them to a certain place. It was all done very subtly, but anyway, it was lovely, and I just thought it was just great. I grew up in San Francisco, and I just thought it was really nice. And for Rotary, I did a program on boys, because boys are not faring very well in our society overall. In key metrics, boys are not doing very well. And so I did this keynote presentation for Rotary, and I decided to make it into a PDF format and email it out to the administrators in the district. So I did that. I just would like it to be part of the conversation. I don't have any great solutions, but I would just like it to be part of the conversation. And I ended up being invited over to the high school by the vice principal to talk to her, and I ended up talking with both she and Mike. And so anyway, I would just like it to be part of the conversation. And I'm volunteering once a week at both Brookside in the kindergarten and at Blosser in the 5th grade. And I really like being on campus once a week, working with a teacher in a classroom. It gets me on campus, and I sort of see the workings of a classroom over the school year. It teaches me a lot. And I've seen, and it also, I'll be Xeroxing in the teacher's room or something, and so I'll hear people talk, and I get in conversation with other personnel also. And I've seen a lot of unlocking the code instruction, which has been really informative to me, to see it in the classroom. And so that's partly what I've been doing. And I also was asked to be the board representative for the Education Foundation. Because in the Education Foundation bylaws, they're supposed to have a school board representative on their board. So I was asked if I would be willing to do that. I guess Cynthia was.
Yes.
And so anyway, so I said I would be glad to do that. So I guess they voted me in at their last meeting, and so I'll start
It
attending.
was unanimous.
Yeah, so I'll start attending on a regular basis, so, and try to hear what they have to say and also maybe communicate things. Like I know that I was talking to a teacher at Blosser that was telling me that there's not quite enough library time at Blosser with a staff person in the library. And so I was thinking that, well, maybe part of the Education Foundation money, since they're earmarked for libraries, maybe, I don't know if they could pay for a few extra hours a week or something like that. But anyway, it's, so I hope to represent both the school district as well as the Education Foundation. So that's it from me.
Just a quick question. What got you interested in the boys project?
Well, that's a good question. I actually did when I was teaching, this is a couple years before I retired, I did a talk at some presentation here in Willits on gangs, and I talked about boys. And I actually wrote an article for the Willits News. That was the only newspaper at the time on it. But I think it's from 20 years of working in middle school and high school and seeing in special ed, so I saw a lot of boys, and I also raised a boy, so that was my only child was a boy. And somewhere along the line, I developed an interest in paying attention to how boys are doing. And in 5 key metrics, they're not doing well. So, just a statistic. By the time boys reach late adolescence, their suicide rate is 5 times that of girls. I mean, that is just a horrendous statistics to me. 5 times the rate of suicide of girls by the time they reach late adolescence. And that's just an example. So.
Thank you. The presentation that she did was nothing short of spectacular. Amazing information, well worth spending some time delving into that. Thank you. Robert?
My daughter really enjoyed that performance and being involved in it. The FFA, absolutely a wonderful organization. When my first admin job was at a high school. That year I got to go to the FFA convention. It was in Kansas City at that time. And I looked at all those thousands of kids up there, and all the kids I met were respectful, and they knew their manners. They'd shake your hand, they'd look at you in the eye, their grip was firm. And then I heard their speeches. I thought, these are the leaders of our future leaders of the United States. Absolutely amazing. And so I put my kids immediately right into FFA. Absolutely wonderful organization. Does great things. I know you're a Rotary member, and although it's my other hat, I'm a swim coach, and we just received a donation from Rotary. Thank you very much. But what that brought to light was how much our community does for our schools, the amount of money they give to the school sites, the different sports and clubs, individual classes. It's just amazing. Our kids go out to fundraise, and they get supported. And for being such a small community, they really support well, and they dig deep for our kids, and I appreciate that. Also, you were talking about the ELAC and the ELAC meetings. What we did in one district, and we should share this, is that if the ELAC votes, they can be part of the school site council if it's voted in, and so they were able to get 2 birds with 1 stone, and they had a lot more participation.
They're trying that at Brookside.
Oh,
They tried
there
it
you
last
go.
year and
Yeah,
sort of,
yeah.
and they're gonna push for it this year.
Good
But
deal.
thank you, that's true.
But anyways, otherwise, it's good to be in Willits. Good to be in Willits.
Awesome. Bob?
Well, as a retired high school coach, I definitely appreciate high school athletics and the benefit to the school and the community of having sports teams. Been able to attend girls volleyball, JV and varsity, the boys and girls soccer teams, and JV and varsity football. And I'm very, very impressed by the competitive nature of our students and the excellent sportsmanship that they're demonstrating. And I think our school and our community should be proud of their efforts and the high number of students that are participating. That's it.
I don't go to a game when I don't see you.
Yeah, I think the audience basically should recognize that we all have different passions that we are all interested in terms of supporting our schools and the people that work here. I'm trying to get a little bit more invested in what the site councils do here. For example, I was at the site council at Becker Grove not very long ago. Right now, I'm spending a lot of time working with Brian Bowles in the woodshop area there. We're building some new woodshop equipment that's going to hopefully pay dividends in our third trimester when Brian is going to host basically a door class. So I bought a new tool that is going to go in my shop, but it's going to get delivered to the high school and go into the wood shop for that period of time, and that'll help those guys build doors. Prior to Penzance was indeed an amazing thing, and the backstory, a little bit of that was they got all the information they needed for all the rehearsals that they needed to do well in advance. So they did all that rehearsal work without the San Francisco Opera people, and then the San Francisco Opera folks show up on the day of the production, go through a real brief walkthrough, and then that whole thing comes together in a matter of minutes as the pro goes on. So it was really an amazing event to watch come through. We talked a little bit about expectations with respect to what the superintendent put out in an email to all the teachers about where they want kids to be at the end of the year in terms of being at grade level for reading and math and so forth. That's 75% or 75% of kids testing 80% or above. And I honestly don't know if those are realistic expectations or not. I know the superintendent believes that they are, and quite frankly, I hope that they are. And also but understand that some of that stuff came out of the prior board meeting where no small number of teachers stood up and said, we want change, and we want to be able to spend more time teaching to the whole child, if you will. And this board member recognizes that, understands it, and if you recall, I encouraged the superintendent and those folks to have some dialogue, figure out what's missing, and work together to reach an accommodation. And my point here is that works. It clearly works, but everybody has to be willing to step up to the table and offer something at the table. And I guess what I'm really trying to say here is this is showing, in my opinion, a little bit of a softening on the part of the superintendent to say, okay, I'm listening, and as long as you guys are willing to play ball, I'm willing to play ball. And this board recognizes that and strongly supports that kind of interaction between administration and labor, all the way to the bottom, from all the way at the top. But with that, again, comes expectations, and those expectations need to be taken seriously. The board, again, we brought the superintendent on board with one primary goal, and that was to improve test scores. And he's attempting to do everything he can to put the tools in play to bring those test scores up. Those expectations from the board to the superintendent are still very high. And quite frankly, we're not going to back off on that. We want to see that occur, but it needs everybody to play. So those expectations, please, everybody needs to recognize that those are serious in terms of the superintendent passing those on down, and the board supports those expectations. I guess what I'm really trying to say is don't look at that change as backing off from those goals. That change is simply, if you guys think you guys can help meet those expectations with a little bit of change or a little bit of a little different way, we support that as well. But push for those goals.
I don't
make those
think
goals
there's
happen.
any resistance to having that kind of expectation. I think we would all like to have 75% at or above. Some of the concerns that I've heard voiced so far are, does the board recognize that we live in one of the highest highest rates of trauma in our children in California? That our homelessness, our foster care, our rates of poverty, we live in a very unique population, which means taking a student up 2.5 grade levels in 1 year is going to be exceedingly challenging.
Yeah,
And it will take a tremendous amount of support, not just a half day on the last day of school.
And I can speak to that a little bit too, and that is, you're right. If you've got a third grade student that sort of fell through the cracks and they really only have a first grade reading level, one would argue that realistically, that expectation should be, if they got a first grade reading level at third grade, by the time they get out of third grade, we hope that they've got at least 1 year of growth.
Yes.
So
Yes.
arguing that that's the minimum that we should be doing for every student in the district, no matter where they are, they should be getting at least 1 year of growth in those key areas.
So then maybe instead of saying 75%, we should say 1 year growth for each child.
Possibly.
The only thing, if we did the 1 year of growth, it wouldn't get us out of the hole.
Right.
You know, we have to increase through interventions. I know a number of sites are doing RTI now, and you're deploying and doing all kinds of different things, but we gotta intervene for those where they're at now.
Right.
But yeah, that would be great if we got a year growth from start, from kindergarten, if we got a year, then we'd be right on.
But see, that's part of the reason, like what's going on this week, where teachers are being encouraged to contact those parents, especially those parents for the kids that are at risk of not getting that 1 year's growth minimum. So, once again, I just wanted to, basically, a really brief comment, essentially to say that both the board and the superintendent are supportive, and we're trying to find ways to show that support, so that you guys know that we're not trying to ram stuff down your throats, but we are serious about trying to make a difference.
So are we. We share a common goal.
Yes.
And I just want to add to that to say, imagine if the Blosser score was the high school score. Imagine if Blosser was 42. What would the high school be?
I would hope if the
It
trend.
would be 60-something or.
Well, again, you
Imagine
said
what
there's
would happen.
intervention at middle school and high school that we don't have at Blosser, so maybe
Well-
that's something we need to look at too.
Well, no, they have it because there's no choice but to have it. They're doing things that should have been done previously. And so I just want folks to imagine if those scores were backwards, because that's what it would look like in most districts. It would be 40, 30, 20 instead of 20, 30, 40. Imagine what would happen if we sent our kids to grade level to Bechtel. What would happen as they went through? It would be dramatically different. Dramatically different. And that's the goal. I'm about the results. That's where I am. I'm about the results. It's kind of like the budget, you know. I don't get in Nikki's business about what line item does this go in. I just flip to the last page.
She's heartbroken. She thought you studied all her hard
No, she knows. She clearly knows. I don't even have access to the software to look at the funds.
So segueing off of that, right into superintendent comments?
Paula, did you want to?
Well, I just wanted to bring up one other little thing that has to do with those scores, and that is, I know that people, I'm certain they attempt to make classes pretty evenly balanced, but one thing I've found a lot in my career was that the more evenly balanced, although it's a broad span, of students that you have, the much more likely they are to be successful and excel. It just looks like sometimes some classes have a higher proportion of students who are ready to jump into grade level and beyond. And other classes sometimes have a tendency to already be a couple of years back as 20 of their 24 kids, or 16 of their 24 kids, as opposed to maybe half or only 6 or 7. And it makes a big difference when children have other children to watch or to bounce off of or to be exposed to, so that it's just important that the class is a little more evenly balanced as opposed to not, you know. Not that I want to get into the whole ELP discussion at this point, but that sometimes can be an issue, as can be, this teacher does really well with students who need a lot of intervention, or this teacher does really well with behavior issues, or this teacher, you know, really works well with the special ed department, you know, and your class ends up not looking quite as balanced as your neighbor's class, which makes it a bigger difficulty to get them all to a particular spot on the spectrum.
And a perfect example of what I'm talking about is, I think it was second grade, was Relena still here?
No, she left.
Okay, I think it was second grade, opening Dibble scores. And this includes summer regression. 50% of their kids were green or blue at the start of the year. That's a good place to start from. So my expectation is, by the end of the year, 75% is not unreasonable.
No, for something like that, it'd be great. That's,
And
you know.
if you look at those Dibble scores and you look at those opening scores, those were pretty good. With one exception, they were really good. And just imagine building on that throughout the year. Like I said, it's results. How we get there might be different, but I've looked at unlocking the code the same way from day one. It is teacher professional development. Everybody's got a toolbox full of, here's how you teach phonics. Everybody's got a toolbox of, here's everything you ever wanted to know about grammar and then some. So you have the toolboxes to teach those skills to those who need it.
We still don't have workbooks, like 5 of us teachers at Blosser. I don't even have one to make copies of.
Okay, you gotta get that to me, because I'll get it
I've
done.
spoken to Nancy several times about it, and
Okay,
Jess
well,
is
if you don't have
one of
it,
the other 3rd grade teachers that doesn't have them, and
if you don't have them, you gotta get it to, I'll take care of business. 'Cause-
Well, yeah, Brookside was getting theirs,
Right.
you know, so that was a good thing from
Yeah.
last month.
Kathleen went around and made sure everybody was set to go. Okay, I'm gonna go through my stuff really fast. Homecoming week, tons of cool stuff going on. I highly encourage you to come to the game Friday, not because we're playing well, but to see what you see. You're gonna see a ton of community people here. You're gonna see lots of clubs, activities, band, everything's gonna be up and running. Grants, we already talked about the drinking fountain grant. They're slower than molasses, they're killing me. But we have 4 other grants going right now. Hopefully, within the month, our new bus will be here. I think that's all locked, done, and sealed, so we'll have a new bus. We have a playground grant that I did with Kathleen for Brookside to add to their playground. We made it to round 2, and I'm assuming we're gonna get funded if we just follow through. So I'm meeting with the PTO there to pick out the one we're gonna try and do. And it's one of those grants where they incentivize us to buy from these vendors, they give us a break on the price, and the district has I think it's an $8,000 or $9,000 match. But we'll get a $25,000 to $30,000 playground out of it that we have to install. The other one is the van that I'm working on. And I got a note from the guy with the van that said, hey Mark, we're gonna have it for you next week. I'm like, oh my God. Can the grant catch up to the van is where I'm at right now. So, what's the 5th one? I don't even remember what the 5th grant I'm working on. Oh, food service. Alex and I and Christy went and observed some food services programs that are really effective and do a great job. They had some unique equipment that we didn't have. To be on $50,000 worth of equipment we don't have. I knew that I didn't have time to write a grant, but I found a company who, if I gave them all the data, would write our grant for us, and they get a 10% kickback if you're successful only. If you're not, they don't get anything. So essentially, I'm rolling the dice with 5,000 and we'll get 50,000 in equipment. Only if we get accepted do we pay them. And so those kettle cookers that we saw, Alex, one at Blosser, one at the high school, a salad bar line, a heating unit out there where you can have warm stuff so they can come through. So that's what I put together. So hopefully those will all be successful. You know, hopefully they'll just complete and get done. That would be my goal. I'm kind of up in the air on them now, and I need to get them cashed in. But we are in the progress of getting those. Property sale, I met with the city today. We already did I went to the zoning commission for the 10 acres behind Blosser. We're getting it rezoned to R3. There may be one other testing thing we have to go through to get that property sold. There's a gentleman who lives on Locust Street who has an acre adjacent to us who wants to be part of it now. And so he would add an 11 acre to the property. And so obviously he would get paid for it. He's not donating it or anything. But it makes it a much more, it's pretty hard to find 11 acres in the center of town that's flat buildable space. And we're sitting on it. Again, as I told you folks, I hope we can sell it, and it isn't the money we would get from it. It's houses. It's the issue Dawn's talking about, finding places to live. Bring kids to the district. And whatever revenue we get, it's gonna put a parking lot at the high school, and it's gonna put a roof on Blosser, and, I mean, we use the funds to fix facilities, because that's a desperate need for us. Survey. There'll be some folks in the community getting a random survey that we talked about last time in regards to a potential bond. And so they call and do email, so they do a random sample of the community, and they're gonna be starting that survey probably in another week. We went through and I took your suggestions that you guys gave me, we rephrased that. I'm very comfortable with the questions you had about length of time and how they do it and their process, so we'll get that good information.
The final survey, is it in print now? Can we get a copy of that?
I believe so. I think he sent it to me today.
Okay.
But the reality is, folks, is I just want to know. The survey will tell us yay or nay, go or stay. And like I said, I don't want to spin my wheels. I just want to know. Power outage. Quickly, I tell folks this is pretty simple. If you get up in the morning and your power's out at home, ours is probably out too. We're not going to be in session. If yours is on, ours is probably on. We're in session. I did answer the question, if we had a power outage during the day, the school day, we would stay in session and ride the day out. The reason for that is the last thing I want to do is send people home early where there's nobody at home, where's the bus, where's the kids, all that. Because in a power outage, the one thing that works really well is the bus radios. Unfortunately, nobody hears it but the bus drivers. So that's our plan. If we have a power outage, my guess what would happen is a lot of parents might come and get their child, but we're going to stay in place and perform as normal. FFA barns. Sometime the end of the month, we'll have 2 brand new barns out in the back here that are going to be just fabulous structures for FFA. And that money comes from a donation from an inheritance that the district got from a really, really kind guy who Jennifer Drew is doing a great job at getting this put together. I work for Jennifer on this project. And so quick one, Willits Educational Foundation, when we talked about fundraising, $56,000 was raised from the summer gala. 36 was the year before, it was 56. The bidding was crazy.
It's also Rotary, by the way. Rotary is co-partners with the Education Foundation and the Summer Gale.
Yeah. WASC at the high school. In a week and a half, we'll get our WASC report coming. The people are gonna come and visit the high school. The teachers and admins are doing a great job of put their program together. Everything looks really good. They have great documentation. I think you'll be really impressed with the data Mike has on the progress the high school's made. I think you'll be really impressed with what that has. Last one, it's parent-teacher conference week. In the high school, they handled it differently than the elementaries and middle. What they're doing at the high school is they're doing emails and call homes to parents of students who aren't where they need to be in their classes, whether it's attendance, performance, or whatever. An example, when I came here today, I got here at about 3 o'clock, Mr. Alan East was in on the phone calling parents and talking to them. So the high school is a little bit different. We're more concerned about getting volume than a true traditional parent conference. You know, kids who are doing well, their parents are showing up. That's really not who we're looking for. We're looking to enhance performance of those who aren't doing well. And so they handle it slightly different at the high school. But this is a first because they haven't had conferences before. Done.
We talked a little bit about food service. Is there a chance we could get a fairly comprehensive report in a couple of months about changes that food service has made?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. When you see our budget, you'll see that that's going to come to light quite painfully.
Yeah, could we shoot for something like either December or January, so we can have a presentation to tell us what changes we've made and the effects we expect those changes to have?
As you know, we have some significant changes we need to do to even get close to even.
Right, and I don't expect us to get even.
No,
Just
but
hoping that from a budgetary standpoint, we can make some significant changes there.
as I said in one of my notes to you guys, our audit was pretty ugly.
Yes.
And we have a lot of things to fix. And we will do so, but everything can't happen overnight.
I understand. That's the reason why I was kind of looking for out towards like maybe January.
Yeah.
December, December, January.
It'll be before January because some of the significant changes will take place in January.
Okay.
I just had two questions. The survey ended up costing less than $23,500, right?
Is 18.
It was 18?
Yeah.
Okay, and then if there is a power outage early enough in the morning that no one comes to school, does the district get to claim it as, some sort of emergency so that the state comes in and covers it? Or is that your snow day instead, or what
Well,
happens?
we will try. And if they allow us to cover it, great. If not, looks like we're coming to school on March 16th or whatever it is.
The snow day?
We've been getting some communication related to that process, which is a waiver process. I think you guys have approved some before for other reasons. And essentially the communication was like, here's the process. We encourage you to use this process if this happens in your district. You don't know until you go through the whole application process whether the state will approve that revenue waiver or not. And so ultimately, as Mark said, we would hope that they would recognize that this is impacting districts all over the state.
Didn't we go through that process with the fires?
We did.
We did. So, I would say optimistically, we would expect to see them approve those waivers, but until you go through the process, we just don't know.
So you wouldn't know then if there were like a limit of 2 days. I heard that a district found there was a 2-day limit to power outages, and they were out 3 or 4 days or something.
I've
This
not
was
heard
what
that.
was- Yeah, well, it was sketchy, I must say, but.
In honesty, I'm going to make the decision based on safety.
Right.
I'm not going to take into consideration, are we going to use March 16th or
Yeah.
is this 2 days, 1 day? But to have school with 0 electricity would be a wreck. There's no technology, no communication, no lights, nothing works basically. It's not going to be conducive to education on top of that. we're way more productive to have a real day where we have everything else.
And I'm not sure if historically that waiver program has had any kind of limits built into it, but even if there had been, I mean, just like all the other agencies, this whole PG&E issue is so new. I imagine the state is having to really seriously look at that and determine what their strategy is gonna be, because I think we're seeing like, this could be huge if this continues on.
And as Nikki said, it's not just Willits Unified, I mean, there's school districts all over the
Nobody
state,
in Lake County.
and tens of thousands of students are out of school today, so.
I just got a recorded call, because I was supposed to sub for Principal Canuck, and I just got a recorded call. They're closed, they were closed today, and they're closed
The
tomorrow.
only district in Mendocino that was closed was Leggett.
Oh.
And not Whale Gulch, because they're off the grid, no surprise, but they're off the grid. Leggett School was the only one in the county, because I'm 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm text message, call, and, yeah. Leggett was the only one who lost power.
Okay, thanks.
Ready to move on?
Yes.
Public comments on the consent agenda? Anybody? I believe we have an item we want to,
Yeah, I would like to pull item 11, second read of final approval for the sexual health and HIV/AIDS prevention for separate discussion and vote.
okay. Do you want to deal with that tonight, or do you want to table it and offer some information for next meeting?
So is that what you'd like to do?
Well, is it something that, I understand you have strong feelings about this, and I have no issue with that. Just want to know whether or not it's information is there enough information you can impart tonight to make a difference, or is it?
Well, probably not. It would just be, I could provide the board with some materials, which would.
I, for one, would prefer that.
Okay, okay.
I think that's a good suggestion, because this is a second read.
Okay.
And you either have to thumbs up or thumbs down. And if you want, there's no reason you can't table it.
So I guess from my perspective, I'd like to see the information you'd like to offer and see any recommendations you have for any adjustments or changes to this policy.
Okay.
And then, of course, you can, if you forward that to Mark, and then he'll pass it on to the rest of us.
Okay. I just didn't know as a board member how much I was supposed to influence how other board members vote, so I could just provide you with information.
You always have the ability to communicate with your board members and try and get them to vote your way.
Okay.
Will this then come up as an open discussion? I mean, I'm real well aware of people that would be interested in speaking to it.
At our next board meeting.
At our next board meeting?
And I
Okay.
think, based on the conversation we're hearing, Trina's not going to put this in consent. This will
I
be,
have not, and I
this will
actually
be-
just put it.
this will be a separate item on
L
its own.
at the very bottom for next meeting.
In other parts of California, it's very controversial.
Right. And I'm going to want Spencer to weigh in on it too, because I think he'll have a good perspective.
Okay. So do we need to actually vote on pulling this?
No, I just pulled it off of there,
Okay.
and so,
So item 11 will be handled at the next board meeting.
let me tell you how I have this. First and second, to approve the consent agenda, tabling item number 11, board policy AR 6142.1, sexual health and HIV/AIDS prevention for next week.
Excellent, thank you. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda without item 11.
I move that we approve consent agenda without item 11.
Second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion from the board? All approve? Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay. We're at item number C, Charlie, approval of Education Protection Act expenditure report for 2018-19.
This is a really informative one, right?
It sure is. This is a requirement that came about as a result of Prop 30, which I believe was passed in 2012. 2012 or 13. At that time, the state had cut funding to school districts, and in an effort to return the funding to a higher level, they passed some sales and income taxes, and when that funding came back to districts, we were instructed that it would not be for use for administrative salaries and benefits. And so as an ongoing requirement of this, we annually have to show how we then did use those funds. So we put all of that funding into our teachers' salaries, and that's, I think, been the common practice that most districts do. The revenue that comes in as part of that is part of our LCFF revenue. So when you're looking at budget or unaudited actuals, that amount that we see on this EPA report is within the LCFF revenue amount. It's part of that calculation, but we're required to hold it in a separate location so that we can show clearly how we use the funds.
That was 2.3 million for this last budget year.
I believe so.
It can't be used for administrators or things like that. It has to be used for instruction.
Right.
Motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Second by Mr. Kovic, any discussion? Just some paperwork stuff. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Carried forward. Approval of GAN limit resolution 2019/20-5, another annual.
There's two pieces here. One was the resolution language itself was in the original packet, and then we distributed today the actual calculation and form that comes out from our unaudited actuals. And what I included with that also is this fiscal report that says it's GAN limit calculation time. This just has a really nice summary of the GAN limit. But essentially, the GAN limit was put in place many decades ago as a way to prevent government spending from increasing at too rapid a rate. And so this calculation is done every year, both at the local government agency level as well as at the state level. And essentially, it has become somewhat of a moot point because the appropriations for school funding and public funding are growing at a far slower rate than what the limit is, and so we never have an issue where we exceed this limit. But it is a calculation we're required to do on an annual basis.
So the question I would ask is, does someplace like St. Helena actually approach or exceed their GAN limit?
Well, because it is to do with the state funding, I'm not sure if
yeah.
all of,
Yeah.
I don't
The
know.
answer is no.
Doesn't apply.
I don't
Does
know
not
that
apply.
their local revenue is a part of that calculation,
It's not.
so, yeah. So, if there are no other questions, this is just a routine item that we have to do annually along with our unaudited actuals.
So a motion to approve item B, approval of GAN limit resolution.
I move that we approve the
Okay,
GAN limit.
it's been motioned and approved, and seconded by Paula. Any discussion, Bordeaux? All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
That should be a roll call vote, I apologize, the resolution.
Oh, I didn't actually, okay, no problem. So, Paula?
Aye.
Jean?
Aye.
Robert?
Aye.
Robert? Aye. Aye, and myself, aye. And approval of unaudited actuals report for 2018-19.
So this is the enormous packet that everyone has. Page 3 is really where the general fund records are started. And then when we get to page 4, we can see what our net increase or decrease in our fund balance. So this shows our deficit spending. And typically what I mostly focus on when we have these discussions tends to be on the unrestricted side, which is column A. Mainly because on the restricted side, as we know, those funds are very earmarked and very restricted in their use. And so any fund balance that does exist is already quite limited in what we would be able to do with it. So typically when we're having discussions regarding fund balance, we tend to focus more on the unrestricted side. We did come in with a deficit of $339,793. And that is quite a bit more of a deficit than what we were anticipating at the time that we did our estimated actuals with budget adoption. At that time, we were looking at a potential deficit spend of $176,000. And you had mentioned the food service audit. We did experience a significant loss of revenue related to the outcome of that program audit. And so we had quite a bit of revenue disallowed through that process. And
Has that door been closed?
Yes.
Okay.
yes, the determinations have been made, and at this point, the part of the process that we're in is responding to corrective action plans. So we have to commit to various measures to resolve these
The
issues.
problem in food service, it's a reimbursement.
Right.
It's not hey,
Upfront revenue.
we'll give you this and
The outlay
show us you
occurred.
spent it
The
correctly.
program expenditures occurred already. This
Right.
was a disallowance of 18-19 revenue for a program where we already expended funds. And it's a program for which we already make a large contribution to begin with from our unrestricted general fund. And so that really is what is driving the change that we see from estimated actuals to now.
And which program is that?
Food
Food
service.
service.
I know it's at food services, but where did we,
District-wide.
There were
the district,
various
right,
issues.
was it a miscalculation or?
We had several issues. So we had some issues with claims that did not get filed within the timeline, the required timeline. We had issues with records. So they go into check things like the menu production records, transport records. It's very, very, very specific, the requirements on this. And point of sale process and things like that. So that was responsible for a chunk. We had some particular school sites where they identified that the processes were not in place that needed to be, so disallowed that whole site. We also had a correction related to the CEP program that we put in place. That's the Community Eligibility Program. So that program, we qualified for that program by having over a certain threshold of students who are what they call direct certified for free and reduced status. So in other words, we can certify that they are in that socioeconomic category by means of matching them to other programs that they already are eligible for. And so then the percentages that we can show from that process are what drive our reimbursement rates. How many of our meals get reimbursed at the free level and at the paid level. And so in the process of auditing that, it was discovered that we had some eligibility that we should not have included in that original application process. And it was a fairly modest change, luckily, because it didn't put us below the threshold of being able to participate in the program. So it just adjusted down what our reimbursement rates were going to be for
So it just seems like some clerical accounting type work changes and maybe some
Micromanaged
organizational.
food service would be the
Some of
real
this-
accurate term.
Yeah, some of this, and the audit's been occurring annually, but oddly enough, and the rules have been in play for some time, but let's just say that the audit that we've experienced this year was far more in depth than what we've experienced in the past. and the rules were applied much more strictly.
You mean the state's changed the game on this? I've never heard of that.
I would
Imagine
say
that.
that part of what we experienced is that in, I believe, 2010 is when the sort of current iteration of this program went into place. And so when the audits started after that implementation, I think they were approaching it with a much softer standpoint on, fiscal penalties. But the process has always involved where they identify issues, deficiencies, weaknesses, and we are expected to respond with what our corrective action will be and to correct those issues. And unfortunately, I think that we do see that, there were things that maybe they didn't ding us for them originally, but now they've gone through a couple layers of audit or a couple rounds, and at this point, they're not getting that level of leniency.
In short, the deficit we had projected, we would have been spot on had it not been for the food service issue. We were right on target. And the change in the two is basically food service.
But it was an expensive learning curve, if you will.
And the only plus I bring out of this is, it is going to not only help, it's going to force us to get into a more efficient, effective way to do food service. And
Our trip to Lake County to see basically a model food service operation was eye-opening, to say the very least. And if we are able to implement some of the things that they utilize over there in Kelseyville, and I'm sure we can, then we'll see some dramatic change. And that was the reason for my looking for a report in December, January, to show what changes we have made and what things we expect to see come out of those changes.
And I'll give you one really good example. They produce out of one kitchen, the high school at Kelseyville. They're 250 kids bigger than we are. They produce out of one kitchen with a close high school lunch. And for us, we're producing out of 4 kitchens. We're already not very efficient. We had too many choices on the menu. We need to produce out of 2 kitchens. That's part of the change that will come in January, is that Blosser will be producing the food for Brookside. The high school will be producing Bechtel, and Sherwood and Sanhedrin like it does now. And those are the best 2 kitchens of our 4. The Brookside kitchen, for example, has a $30,000 freezer in it that has an ice mountain in it right now. It's just old and ancient. We're not going to invest $30,000 in putting in a new freezer there. We're going to use probably the best kitchen in the district is at Blosser. We're going to use that kitchen to produce for Brookside, because Brookside's kitchen also has a ton of other things. If you ever go there at lunch, you can hear the condenser running and heating up in that room. We've put in a Dutch door to let it try and vent. It's time to call it quits and use the good kitchen and produce out of one. And that efficiency will save us a lot of revenue and expense, so.
Are we gonna transport food?
Same way we do now.
Yeah, we have vehicles to do the transport. We have our Scooby-Doo wagons that are fine for transporting food, just not students.
Yeah, they've also got kind of economy of scale also by doing it at one kitchen. We won't be able to reach that level of efficiency by doing that, because we're basically going to ride out of 2. But as an example, they produce all their meals with seven full-time employees. I think we're at 12.
Right.
So as time goes on, hopefully we'll be able to get a little more streamlined and be more efficient and cost a little bit less.
And just to be honest here, the panacea of fixing it is not closing the high school campus for lunch, because that would increase how much we have to buy, how much we have to produce, and the manpower to do it. That's not the magic bullet. And facility, we couldn't seat the whole high school in the cafeteria. We would have to go to probably 3 lunches, which is not conducive to the academic schedule. And the academic schedule is gonna wag the dog, not the food service program. And so that's kind of, you know, I hear that from folks, well, just close the high school campus and we'll get all kinds of, that's not the answer. The plus minus on that is plus, but it's not a big enough plus to have 3 lunches and go through the chaos of rescheduling and organizing everything. It's just not there.
So how is this gonna impact personnel
Well, it's gonna impact personnel over time.
over time? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we have transitions all the time in food
Right.
service.
Okay,
Yeah. The goal is not to go in and wipe out staff or do
Okay.
layoffs. The goal is to go in and create the ideal program. We should have ample staff to do that. And just as we've done everywhere, when we have an opportunity to reduce down, we do that.
okay.
I have a question for you, Nikki. When you said we still were eligible for these,
CEP.
right, then that means still we have a low enough economic ceiling or whatever, that everyone is still free and reduced, right?
Correct, so we will continue to not charge students for the meals. All that has changed is the rate at which we will be reimbursed for meals from the federal and state government. But we are allowed to stay in that program, continue offering free food for all students regardless of their status.
There's no such thing as free and reduced anymore.
Yeah, it's rather.
It's
Yeah.
you're either in or out.
And basically what happens is we have to go through this process of identifying how many students are direct certified. Every 4 years, we go through this application. And so they've recalibrated the percentage at which we get reimbursed in this program. We can reapply if we see that those rates go up in a given year. So now that we have this issue happen, we'll check our numbers again this year and see if they're higher, we'll reapply. If not, we just stay in the same cycle and reapply in 3 years.
So, excuse
And
me.
the layman term is, when she says direct certified, if you qualify for any other basic government program, you're directly certified to be in the free program.
And basically what the issue we came upon was that we have to do data matches, like with the state data on that. We also get lists from our county related to the students that are in certain programs. We also collect applications, and sometimes the family will make a note of the number that is associated with their eligibility for another program. And so when we put in our percentages, we had included those folks as direct certified, and the state said, no, it has to be only through these other data matches. If you get it on the application, even if they are eligible for the other program, if they don't show up on these other lists, we can't incorporate them in that percentage. And so it just brought that percentage down a bit. So that was the difference. But luckily, I can't remember what the percentage is for the threshold, 45% or something like that.
45 or 50. something
Yeah.
like that.
That they reimburse.
No,
No.
that you
To
have to
qualify
still
for
work
CEP.
in order to participate in the program. And so we were still well over that, in no danger of falling out from being in the program. It just changes, like, the number of meals that they'll reimburse us at the higher rate versus the lower rate.
Okay, so that's kind of my question, I guess. The percentage that comes into the district of reimbursement is like 80% of the expenditure, or it's not that high?
So
anymore, or-
so they have like a per meal reimbursement rate, and they have what they set for free meals, reduced meals, and even paid meals. The state provides some reimbursement to the district. And so when you go into CEP, they'll say, okay, based on your application numbers, we're gonna reimburse you, like, at 80% of all of your meals will be at the rate that the free meals get reimbursed at, and the other 20% will be at the paid, which is a much lower reimbursement rate.
Oh, okay.
So you just get kind of frozen with those numbers, and then every month when you put in all of your claims, that percentage of your meals will get reimbursed at those different rates.
Oh, okay. Okay.
The nutshell thing is,
Mhm.
if you had brunch and lunch at the high school, I believe the dollar figure was like somewhere around $7.50. That's how much you
Between the
get,
two.
that's how much you get reimbursed for those meals.
Yeah.
And so our issue is more kids are eating in our food service program than in previous years. Our numbers are up. Unfortunately, our revenue got tanked. But the good news is more kids are eating and we're providing a better service, but we've got to get in line with these rules, regs, and the only thing that's micromanaged is bus drivers and transportation. It is an incredible nightmare of paperwork. The gal that Alex and I and Christy went over and saw at Kelseyville, she virtually doesn't leave her office. She is a manager and constantly doing bidding and records and data entry. She has a cook, and the cook really is the cook. And she's kind of like, I'll get the stuff you need. It's a very different style of operation than we've ever had.
She stays extremely focused on the paperwork side of things and on the budget side of things.
What are my numbers?
Has very little to do other than, she's like the maestro, if you will. She's not playing an instrument.
Yeah.
And it's not so much an issue of we spend $10 per day per kid on food and they're
No.
only interested in reimbursing $7.50.
No.
I mean,
But it's more.
we certainly do spend more than what we get reimbursed at, which is why
Right.
we've consistently had a contribution from our general fund,
Yeah.
which is not abnormal in and of itself. I think that most districts have at least some contribution. Ours has been growing, and we've already had some concern about that. We did see some positive trends, as Mark said, having gone over to CEP. That did increase our participation, which did have a positive impact on revenue. If we had not experienced, this, I think it would have been a better situation for us, obviously.
When I got on the board 6 years ago, we were spending about $80,000 a year on food service out of the general budget. In other words, that was the amount that we weren't being reimbursed. We were losing, if you will, that the state wasn't reimbursing for. I think we hit 230 this year.
Well over 200 prior to
And
this.
Fort Bragg is over the 200
Right.
limit too.
Now-
And part of that is PERS goes up, wages go up. Those are, it's not the cost of the meal, the meals do go up, but PERS and wages are making that number go up way higher than the price of the meal.
And the reimbursement rates, they have almost never changed. I mean, I think they went up one time in maybe 2006 or 2010, something like that.
Despite the fact all the other costs have gone up.
Absolutely. So that trend is,
It's typical
something
state.
all districts are facing.
Yeah. It's we're back to the
Non-reimbursed.
unreimbursed mandates kind of thing.
Yeah.
And this program is through the state, but actually through federal government.
Right, the majority of the funds are federal funds.
And so it filters from the feds to the state, who micromanage it through additional rules in California. It's not that the fed rules aren't enough, they add to those for us.
Once again, there's a lot of hands in the pie that are basically taking money off the top of whatever gets to us anyway.
Yeah.
So just by way of comparison, again, the superintendent told you that they're feeding roughly 250 more kids over there than we are. But last year, their deficit was $30,000.
Whoa,
So
from 200 to
obviously,
100.
if we implement a significant number of changes that they have, that we saw, and we expect to get implemented over here, I don't expect us to get anywhere near that $30,000 mark, but I would hope that if we get back down to the $80,000 mark or even 60, I'd be real thrilled.
Right. It is a very micromanaged program that, literally, your head of food service is no longer really even part of the kitchen. They're a separate management function, and it's really a damn shame because you have to be a chemist to make the menu now, and it's just.
This should be so simple.
Right.
But it's not.
It really should.
Well, and I think it's, school nutrition is always been a hot topic in communities, and really what's sad to see is that this system, although it was intended to, I guess, create more nutritious meals in schools, is actually harder for schools if they want to do any kind of scratch cooking and things of that nature. It's harder to navigate for those schools than for the ones who want to just buy, prepackaged things, because when you buy prepackaged, the vendor does all the legwork for you. And so it's a really difficult environment to operate in.
So let me drag us back to the unaudited actuals.
The last thing that I want to say actually is to do with what you see here on the 1920 budget columns, which is a reminder that this is really just what we adopted in June. So this does not incorporate the bargaining agreements, which are in place, have been approved by you all, and are actively happening through payroll, but they have not been incorporated into the budget records yet, so we will see those changes at first interim. So I just wanted to remind everyone of that.
So we'll have a better picture of where we stand with respect to deficit spending for this current budget.
Correct.
Okay. A motion to approve the unaudited actuals report for 2018-19.
I'll move to approve.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Any further discussion from the board?
I have just one more question. Ben, I'm understanding that the cafeteria fund takes care of, covers or in its budget, because I haven't had a chance to look at it, but it's showing, or going to show me, that all the wages and all the supplies and all the everything are coming directly from the cafeteria funding.
Yes, so if you start digging in here, Form 13 is the cafeteria fund.
Right, okay, I remember.
So that's the one that's gonna show you the breakdown of what revenue is coming in, what the salary and benefits specifically in cafeteria are.
Okay, so then in the regular part of our unaudited actuals, when it goes to salaries for certificated, classified, administrative, et cetera, those 009s or 90s, I don't remember the numbers anymore, but whatever that section is, that will not include any of the cafeteria staff or their issues, right?
Correct. The salary and benefits there do not incorporate it. Where we see the impact of food service to the general fund is when we look at other, it's transfers out. Transfers out in section D, other financing on page 3. And it's 1B, transfers out. That incorporates the contribution that is leaving the general fund going to the cafeteria fund.
Okay.
Page 37 is where Form 13 starts, and that is where you'll see salaries and benefits specific to Fund 13. And so the other items that are not incorporated in Form 01, which is the general fund, our preschool, our state preschool fund is separate, that's Fund 12.
Okay.
And adult ed is Fund 11. So there are some salaries and benefits that sit outside of the general fund.
And an example of that would be food service, remember, is its own budget. It has its own fund balance, separate from
Yeah,
ours.
it's totally separate.
Yeah, a long time ago, I used to always think it was in the red, like 35 or 40 years ago, and
It is,
money was
has been,
siphoned.
still
I don't
is.
mean red, I mean in the black or whatever. Money was used to, or the thought was that money was used to to build the cafeteria, remodel it, do all this other, was a very, very long time ago.
Oh, like if there were excess funds, that you could use them for facilities.
And
things of
employees
that
used to
nature.
think that they should be able to pull their benefits, or however you want to discuss their wages and salaries and everything, from those funds. And I thought at one time it all kind of got back together, but it must not have ever, and it was just...
Trust me, they would not be saying that song today, because
Yeah, well, no,
Yeah,
we're in the
right.
hall, but, okay.
No, they're held totally separate in the budget, and then the only interface is where the contribution comes out of general fund into the food service.
That's a once a year.
Correct,
Yeah.
at the end. I mean, we see the projected number throughout the year when we're looking at our budget, but the only time that transaction takes place is when I'm closing the books.
Yeah, we make that based on assumptions at the beginning of the year.
And they pay for summer programs still too, right? The state still reimburses a chunk in a similar way?
Yes, we do have a summer program, although that was one of the programs that we did have some issues with, so I don't know that we ended up with very much revenue from it this year, but yes, that
Yeah.
program is still operating.
Oh, okay.
And it's a space in our budget where Nikki basically puts a $25,000 fund balance in it. That's not real.
Oh, yeah, that's a good thing to point out, if people are gonna
It's
be
not real.
looking at that.
Oh, okay.
There is,
The
well,
real issue is it was minus 230 at the start of the year.
so,
And we make it 25 by doing a transfer.
essentially what happens when you're looking at page 37, and then it rolls around to page 38, you will see that it does discuss fund balance related to this. And the amount that is there actually has to do with our cash in bank. So they keep a like revolving fund where if people are buying a la carte items or paying things on like the NutriKids website, that all that money from sales comes into that account, and then that money leaves there and goes in as revenue into Fund 13. So any money on the day that we're closing, that cash balance in the bank account has to be reported as a balance, as well as any inventory stores. So those are the two items that comprise the fund balance. But when you look at page 37 and you can see that the deficit is 449,000, we have no functional fund balance that we can access, but they are assets in accounting terms. They have to be shown as fund balance. I think that's a really good thing.
With respect to the audit, is there an appeal process for any of that?
Not that we're aware of. We have asked multiple times. What's happened is we've got the bad news back, but we haven't got us the official stuff yet. But I've asked multiple times, and it's not gonna happen. But what is gonna happen is, this best be a one-time issue.
Right.
And we gotta take care of business and fix it.
The other thing I should say is that because we don't have the very final report on this, I did have to do some estimates in terms of the revenue reductions. And it is their well-developed estimates based on working with our auditor, but they are estimates and we may have to make some correction to that in the 1920 budget.
Right. Okay, it's been motioned and seconded, and
Thank you.
any further discussion?
Thanks.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Carries. Items F through K are first reads for a variety of new policies. Please spend some time familiarizing yourselves with those for the next board meeting. And I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Adjourn.
Well, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion is adjourned.
There's gonna be a public
So